Hello. Evening. Rosemary, will you be quiet, please? Excuse me, she's still talking. Rosemary, be quiet. I told you to.
Shut up, Garry.
That's what I was trying to say to you. I remember at one stage when I was mayor, somebody came out to me and they said, "Look, we're really sorry. Everybody's arguing at the moment." And I said, "No, that's absolutely bloody brilliant." And they said, "Why is that?" And I said, "Because people in Christchurch love a scrap. And it's really important. And when people are scrapping and arguing, they are engaged. And I think it's really important. And this is a topic, the global settlement is a topic where there are many sides. Like today, I took a particular line, and Peter Beck over there took another line. But tomorrow night, Peter Beck and I are sitting at dinner together, and that's Christchurch. And that's the really important thing, that we actually scrap and fight because we actually want to make this a better city. And it's always been, I'm on the outside now, but when you're on the inside, it's quite difficult when you're making recommendations and you hope you've got it right, and people pick and scrap and fight over it, but they're actually only trying to they care and they hope that we'll get it better. And I think that's what it's about, and that's what we are going to have tonight. Now, I made a submission today on behalf of the Tuesday Club because there was only 8 days. Sorry. That was one of my. That was one of my lines today about 8 days. Anyway, yes. So I've made a submission, and I have, I'm a tragic bastard. I spent all of Sunday poring over the Local Government Act, which I thought I'd never have to read again, and going through the submissions. And I asked Andrew what happened as a result of the submissions, and he tells me that there'll be lawyers crawling all over my submission. So that's good to know that the legal confraternity are able to charge every 6 minutes excessively in the interests of Christchurch. But I'll send it out in the Tuesday Club notes, and if anybody's got any other submissions, like Pete, you did one, we'll put that out as well. Bruce did one, and I've asked Rod who had no notes, I've asked Rod to speak tonight as well. And so I'd like you to welcome, who's going to speak first? Brendan Anstiss, who led the negotiating team, and then Andrew. Brendan will answer the difficult questions, and Andrew will come through as a true politician and answer nothing.
Let's see how that goes.
Yeah. Brendan.
Thanks, Garry. So I'd actually endorse just what Garry said there, not all of what Garry said today, but I would endorse what he just said there, that the reason that we're here today and that we've worked hard on this over the last 6 months or so is we care about Christchurch, and I know that's the same with everyone in this room. I think people care about it in different ways and show that care in different ways, and today was where the council heard a range of deputations from people who care a great deal, and I've no doubt that will inform council's decision making on Thursday. What I thought I'd start with is just briefly articulating the process and the journey and what we're trying to achieve with the global settlement. We often kind of get caught in the detail pretty quickly, but I've said it to a number of groups recently. There are 3 things that we're trying to achieve and are still trying to achieve with the global settlement. The first is to provide certainty. And when I say certainty, I mean that you know who to talk to and which agency is doing something. It seems logical that you would know who to complain about if the roof of the bus exchange is leaking. But I guarantee us that most of the people in this room would probably go today to the wrong agency. In fact, you might not even know who the agency is or how to contact them. The second point that the global settlement is trying to achieve is to increase momentum, and the global settlement works hand in hand with the $300 million Canterbury Regeneration Acceleration Facility. So between the two of them, they're designed to speed things up, not slow things down. And the third area is to normalise the relationship with the Crown. So for 8.5 years, we've had central government in an extraordinary role, and with extraordinary legislation being able to do all manner of things that isn't permitted or is permitted in different ways and far more balanced ways in our city. And that's obviously been the result from the earthquakes and also the decisions that were made after the earthquakes. And we now think it's time for your elected council as the representatives of the city, representing the people of the city, to have a clear run at running the city. So the normalised relationship simply puts us in the same situation as what a Dunedin or what a Palmerston North or Auckland and Wellington have. It doesn't mean that we don't have any relationship with the Crown or the government at all. It simply means we have a normalised relationship with them. And we think the time for that is well overdue. So against trying to achieve those things, what the global settlement has been over the last, if we say 18 or 12 months, has been a commitment from the Crown and the Council officials, mandated by our respective governors, to work towards a proposal that we would put to both the Council and then the Minister would take to Cabinet. And we're now at the kind of crunchy point of that for the last 6 months or so, the negotiations have occurred, and we've made public where those negotiations have arrived at. But I do stress that none of the negotiations have been decisions. So as of today, it remains a proposal by officials, and there have been no decisions made. The first set of decisions being sought is from Council on Thursday, and then after that we'll be seeking Cabinet's decision. So if it goes well and Council agrees to it, and then Cabinet agrees to it, then the deal gets inked. If either Council or Cabinet agree to different versions, and this is important because it's effectively what happened in 2013 with the original cost share agreement, if we agree to different versions, then we don't have a deal. And we're probably back to either the negotiating table or somehow figuring out the parts that we do have a deal with. And this has always been framed as a global settlement, and when we say global, we don't mean that everyone's in it, obviously. It's maybe an exaggeration to call it a global settlement. But what it does is it ties up the loose ends, and for the most part, the way that I've certainly tried to position this is that it delivers on what most reasonable people in reading the cost share agreement would have thought was the outcome from 2013. Now, the unfortunate reality, though, is when lots of people get involved in it, they read the 2013 cost share agreement differently. And we've had a number of deputations today saying this is what the 2013 cost share agreement should have done, and for the most part we agree with all of those. But in the intervening years, that hasn't always been where we've landed. So it's now time to draw a line underneath that. We've gone to different lengths than in the 2013 cost share agreement. So unfortunately, it's a far more legalistic document than in 2013. And the reason for that is because we don't want uncertainty or ambiguity to creep in after the agreement is signed and agreed. That's probably what I talk about in terms of the process, and I know Andrew's going to pick up from today onwards. So I'll now hand over to Andrew Turner, Deputy Mayor of Christchurch City Council.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So in terms of what happened just in the last couple of weeks, the paper that we considered today went into the public arena last Monday. Today we have heard deputations on the paper that we'll be considering and debating and deciding on at Thursday's council meeting, so the day after tomorrow. We heard a number of deputations today, and it was great that there were a variety of very well engaged people that came along to make deputations. They certainly made for a very interesting morning, and there were some patterns. There was a real theme of we want certainty. Can you please make a decision so that we've got that certainty and we can get on and we can move on? And a lot of that theme related to the central city in particular, and the Avon-Otakaro River Corridor, the residential red zone in particular as well. One other thing that came through loud and clear was community aspirations around community governance and community planning for the residential red zone. and the ability to more easily get some temporary uses in place. So clarity and ease of engagement around getting some temporary use of that area in place as well. So they were some really common themes that came through. There were matters raised around the legality of the process, around public engagement, around decision making, around options in the report that we're considering. Of course, we've been briefed as council at regular intervals as Brendan has led the negotiations, so we've been aware of opportunities, options as they've come in front of us. We have informally provided guidance which has led us to the point that we're at. Of course, there are commercial sensitivities around some of the matters that are considered in the paper, and some of that has been, that's the reason why we've got to a public decision now, a public decision-making process now, as we always said we would. Some of what got us there hasn't been able to be so public. In terms of the global settlement, so the legal side of it was raised in deputations. The ease of understanding and availability of supporting figures, again, particularly for the Avon-Otakaro River Corridor residential red zone land and future operating costs, was one thing that came up in submissions. And another thing that did was the proposed Crown benefit from any uplift in value that might be realised on sale or lease. Now, the view of council is that it's highly unlikely, and we certainly wouldn't be intending to sell any of that land as owner. But of course, there are a number of proposals that we are considering that could result in some leasing of parts of the area. And we heard some deputations this morning that told us quite clearly that the financial viability of some of those proposals could be affected if indeed there was a need for us to be sharing any uplift in value because of the lease income with government. So that's obviously something that Brendan continues to work on. And in fact, we had an update before the meeting that remains one of the negotiating points, which is live and may well land differently before Thursday. So we were very pleased to hear that. We will be getting some legal advice, as Garry had suggested, brought to the council meeting prior to any debate or decision making on Thursday, which will address the issues that Garry raised in his submission. And we will also be getting a very concise, easily understood table of the financial implications, so that that's able to be made public before we start any decision making on Thursday as well. And of course, as I've always said, we won't be making any decisions that are not good for Christchurch, and we won't be making any decisions unless we've got the supporting advice that we need to make a good quality decision. Because of course, if this goes well, we'll be judged on a good outcome in the future. If we make decisions that don't result in a good outcome, then this council will be judged on that in the future as well. So we're absolutely determined that we need to get this right. We need an outcome which is good for Christchurch, and we need to be making those decisions on the best possible advice available. Even if some of that is brought to the meeting on Thursday, we'll still have it in front of us before we debate and make a decision. So I was very pleased to see the level of engagement and the level of knowledge and level of passion in the room this morning as we were hearing from the people that came along to make deputations. And it's good to know that some of what we heard has resulted in us asking for further information, and certainly will result in some good quality debate on Thursday before we make a decision. So Brendan and I are very happy to take any questions from the floor. And I'm sure that will result in some discussion around particular areas of interest, or the opportunity for further clarification around anything that people are wanting more information on.
So what were the common themes of the submissions?
So the common themes of the deputations this morning were really, and just to expand on what I said earlier, really were get this done and get it done soon so that we can get early certainty. That really came from the central city and the residential red zone area. Community use of the residential red zone, community governance and community involvement in planning there. And really a sense that people are generally comfortable with what we've got in front of us, even though people realise that this may not be the perfect outcome, but to get to the perfect outcome may take some time. And as I said when I was standing here, might have been a couple of months ago, we could wait for the perfect opportunity, And we could be waiting a long time, and we may in fact never get there. If what we've got in front of us is an agreement which is, or a draft agreement which is acceptable, then, and what we heard this morning really supported that, the balance between certainty early and being able to get on with things and be able to assume control as council and the community should be able to of local matters and get government out of town in the nicest possible way, versus waiting for the perfect outcome which may never come, I would tend to every time go on the let's get some early certainty, let's get the city in charge of its own affairs, and let's get on with this for the good of our communities.
Rod, do you want to?
Sure.
Now, just to explain, Rod was one of the senior staff. He's a boring engineer. Was one of the senior staff at SCIRT, which had the job of doing the infrastructure rebuild for Christchurch. So, and Rod made some really quite significant points in his submission. So, and I'll put a link through to his submission in the Tuesday Club notes this week. So, Rod, just try not to be a boring engineer.
He's got it for engineers.
He has got it for engineers. First of all, thank you very much to both of you for really clear explanations just now, and I respect completely where these folk have come from and what they're doing. And I feel differently to a lot of people about it, about the situation we're in, for two reasons. Firstly, I have an attitude, what's happened's happened. And I don't care whether X said to Y or Y said to Z or something was written that was missing. I don't care. We are where we are. And I agree completely, we should try and find a way forward. But I'm putting my hand up in one respect, and it's actually probably marginal or trivial. It only involves a few $100 million. No, seriously. I mean, what we've been talking about here involves much more than that over a period of time. So the infrastructure, horizontal infrastructure, boring as anything, as Garry said, water supply, wastewater, floods or stormwater, and roads and bridges and things. In every one of those things, the client group decided to cap the spending. Now, I have no difficulty at all with clients deciding to cap the spending, and that's that. But having made that decision and having some years passed, I see that our water supply is fragile, relating to earthquake matters and stuff that didn't get done. Our wastewater system is fragile and is probably leaking into our aquifers. Our road, which order? Floods. We all know that we've got a worse flooding problem, and actually, I hate to hear people say, oh, well, we didn't know at the time. I actually commissioned surveyors to get out there in the first week after the earthquakes, and we knew that week that we had flooding problems coming. And that's plain. And lastly, roads. I don't need to describe to you the situation on our roads and the fact that it's a long-term thing. So my attitude with this is, let's put our hand up. It's time to renegotiate. It's time to say what we settled on or agreed on isn't good enough. We need more support here. And the lady sitting next to me, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name already. Colleen raised the tips on the west coast, the dumps. And I know from Southland, where I used to live, they're all over the place in Southland as well. We've got to address these things. And we can't just put them off and leave them to another generation. And we can't, in a community, do it necessarily by ourselves. So we have to go to government, because actually government is only our money. And we have to make a case. I respect where these folk have come from, which is what's been structured to date, but I'm saying we need to go at it again.
Right. I'm sure there are anyone but Rosemary got a question. Right, Rosemary, you have the first one. She's our quiet one here.
The thing that often gets mentioned is this $14-16 billion that the Crown has spent, whatever. And then I hear people say, well, what about the GST? What about this? What about that? What's the real net amount? Do we have an idea of what that is that the government has spent? Net.
Well, it's a very good question, and Garry told the Mayor off today while she was investigating the answer to this very question. So,
You tried that, all right?
he did try to tell off. The factual answer is that the Crown have spent somewhere between $14 and $18 billion net on earthquake-related issues. That includes, so it depends exactly when you time it, but the figures that we're looking at today were the 2016-17 Crown figures, and it was $14 billion at that stage, and that includes, though, EQC payments.
So EQC, that's the other thing. EQC is us.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
Well, so it's the
Yeah,
Crown. Of
yeah,
course. But you know, that's our money.
Yeah.
Where can we see this itemised?
I think I'm happy to send you the link. It's page 193 of a Treasury document, and I know because we were looking at it today, and that's what I was saying to Leanne, Garry, that factually they're correct, but what is often missed is 2 points. One, it's our money anyway, and that's what you pay into EQC for, is to get the benefit of effectively paying those premiums. And the second is that there's undoubtedly been benefit to the Crown through the increased stimulation and spend, and people often talk about the GST figures and things like that.
Wages.
And wages and things like that. The predecessor for CDC, the predecessor of Christchurch NZ, the city's economic development agency, did a piece of work to examine the GST benefit that the government has received from the $40 to $45 million in total, $40 to $45 billion, in total, that the earthquakes have stimulated investment, and 15% of that, the government's had a huge whack. So factually correct, but it's only part of the answer. You need to look at these ups and downs of those things as well, and when they talk about earthquake recovery, they've got a broad definition of it. It's not simply things that we would count.
Yeah. So you described it as a net. I mean, to me, the net cost is what it costs less PAYE, less GST, less EQC, and why aren't we talking about that figure instead of this other one?
The Mayor and I continued my debate after the meeting, and we've texted and emailed each other a number of times this afternoon, and I ended up at one stage saying, when did you last trust Treasury numbers? And her response was never. So I just said my case rests. I actually think that it's a really good exercise for, and Leanne's probably got the best person around to actually do that, and that's her own brother as Professor of Economics at Lincoln University. So maybe the Tuesday Club could encourage him to do that, and because I'd love the staff and the councillors and all of us to go to Treasury. You're wrong.
I can't believe it hasn't been done. Sorry.
Yeah. It didn't suit them for it to be done.
Just
An economist is about to ask a question.
I think this is probably addressed to you, Andrew. I'm just thinking that, if my roof was leaking at home, I wouldn't be building a new garage for a car. I'd park it on the road. Why is that not understood in terms of the rugby stadium? And I used to play rugby, and I like the game and watch it and everything else. But the roof is leaking, and I just believe that if we looked at a hierarchy of needs in the city, most people, if they were honest, would not place that as high. So I just wonder, it's very hard when we talk about increasing rates or not doing something because it's an election issue and everything else, but we really do, I think, as a society, need some good strength of analysis.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly will be, the stadium certainly will be an election issue. The cost share agreements, the global settlements, isn't the place to relitigate the decisions that we've already made through successive long-term plans and annual plans around the multi-use arena, the stadium. And of course, you've got to go back to the cost share agreement as the base document for any update of that around any commitment to what we refer to as the Canterbury Multi-Use Arena, rather than, as you referred to it, the rugby stadium. Because my view of this facility is that it's going to be for far more than rugby. Rugby is just one of the uses for what will be a key piece of infrastructure. We often hear from the central city businesses in particular that they're having a very hard time. And central city businesses are having a hard time. One of the reasons why is because hospitality and retail in particular have got well ahead of the anchor projects, so the stadium, the convention centre, the metro sports and so on. Or the reality is that those anchor projects have not been delivered to the timescale that they were promised in the beginning. So the other thing I often say when people talk about stadium, if Christchurch is serious about being the capital of the South Island, and been New Zealand's second city, there are some things we just need to have so that our people don't need to go to Dunedin for concerts, and so that all the rugby test matches don't go to Wellington, Auckland, Dunedin, whatever. And a stadium is one of those things. But that doesn't have to be at the expense of social housing or swimming pools or maintenance of parks and gardens or maintenance of roads and footpaths. We've got a perfectly good financial strategy that runs for the next 30 years, but over the 10 years of the current long-term plan sees rates increases decreasing to the level of inflation experienced by council. So we've got a good financial policy, we've got a good 30-year infrastructure strategy that allows us to deliver the upgrades that we need to roads and footpaths, parks and gardens, all of those kind of things, and to spend the 253 million that we've had on budget for some time for the stadium. And we will not be increasing the 253 million we've got on budget. So one of the things we will not do is increase the budget that we've got and put that onto ratepayers. And we've been very clear about that. If the council changes and if there's a different view, then obviously I can't bind the future council, but I can let you know what the view of this council has been, the policy position of this council has been, and what my view is on that 253. That's what we've been committed to from the beginning, that's what we remain committed to, but no more.
Hi, really wanted to make a comment, and it's in response to Rosemary. As an economist, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Having thought about, there are two numbers that are really big ones. One was the EQC, and government borrowed money, and so it had to give it back. And to call that putting money into Christchurch is just bullshit. It's just giving money back to EQC. But the one about GST and PAYE is not quite so simple, because if the people had not been employed in Christchurch fixing the roads and doing whatever else they were doing, they would have been working somewhere else, and government would have got some money in GST and PAYE from those other things that they were doing. So that's not, you can't just subtract that and say, the government got a benefit from that. It would have got much of that benefit anyway.
Well, it's not usually factored into these equations anyway. Yeah,
No,
there are a whole lot of ifs and buts and maybe.
but if I could be an accountant rather than an economist,
You'd be wrong.
that's our problem. That's our problem. Economists are running treasury. And bring back the old accountant. But the thing is that the economy grew hugely. GDP grew on the back of the extra 40 billion that came into
And
the
I
city.
agree entirely that to the extent that GDP grew and there was extra PAYE and stuff as a result, that is a legitimate, should be deducted.
Aha! So we won. Right.
That's not quite so simple.
I knew I couldn't do it on back of an envelope.
Hi, the $1 that you're buying the residential red zone for, is that as is Wearer's figure?
One careful lady owner.
Buy up all those individuals who still haven't sold their properties, and will it also include having to dig up all the roads and whatnot that are no longer needed?
I'll answer the first part of that question. I mean, it is an as is, where is, sold as seen, it's transferring for $1. And I mean, there is a question about whether, in financial terms, the residential red zone is an asset or a liability. There's clearly significant operating expense in the future is going to come with it. But equally, in terms of an asset, looking at it other than financially, in terms of social outcomes, environmental outcomes, community outcomes, it will be a strategic asset for the city, there's no question about that. That, in my view, is why the city needs to own it. and needs to be able to consider as a city what future ownership, future governance looks like. So there are any number of opportunities there. There are also opportunities that have been actively considered that could result in leasing of some of that land, that could then result in an income. And it may be that we're looking at a situation where the leasing income will cover the operating expense of the balance, particularly if we get the funding model, the leasing around those commercial opportunities and the governance model right. I'm going to refer to Brendan, who knows the absolute detail of what the responsibilities and liabilities that come with ownership would be. There are certain things that we're putting on the Crown to sort out before we take ownership, or that'll be an overhang from the Crown's ownership that they need to sort out or pay for. And then there are other matters, obviously, that we take on as owner, as you would expect. But I'll get Brendan just to talk about that detail to answer the second part of your question.
Thanks, Angela. I think if I paraphrase, there are two additional questions. One is the costs of remediating and removing footpaths and things like that. So I'll answer that one. The expectation is that would lie with the landowner, and if the landowner is be the council, that would be a council responsibility. We're not sure about the actual costs or the necessity of doing any of that work, and that will be subject to the actual regeneration plan, which is currently sitting with the Minister for her determination. What I would say is, to date, people have come up with positive proposals, and no one's come to us, as far as I'm aware, and people will correct me if I'm wrong, saying that as part of our proposal we need to dig up the road, or are concerned about what might lie beneath the residential red zone, and there may be different types of contaminants and undoubtedly horizontal infrastructure and things like that lying beneath the ground. So that matter about what in fact we need to do to the land, we won't be able to answer until we see the land uses that are proposed under the regeneration plan. The third question was...
Buying back the
buying back the... Yeah, that's been be fair to say, a sticking point. The decision to red zone and purchase the properties was a Crown decision, and it was based on a policy decision. It wasn't a decision that the council was involved in at all, and the council, while it's certainly advocated for fair settlement for residential red zone, including through the Quake Outcasts process, the council isn't going to get involved in clearing up the what the Crown have created for themselves in terms of that precedent. The reality is that I think there's 100, and Ivan will know the exact number, is at the back of the room. There's 100 odd privately owned properties that aren't residentially red zoned. So the zoning doesn't apply if you didn't take the Crown offer. So there's 100 odd properties spread across the Brooklyn, South Shore, I don't know, things in the South Shore, Brooklands, Otago Raven River Corridor, and some of the Port Hills. The council will need to figure out what the future uses are. There's maybe only a handful of those properties based on the draft regeneration plan that are in an area that might conflict with a different future use. So I can't speak for the position that the council would take, but it's always been very careful to respect the integrity and decision that individual property owners have in deciding whether to stay or to leave. So the council, I would speculate, would be very loath to enter into any sort of arrangements or force the hand of property owners that for the last 8 years have resisted the Crown offer. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Why the mad rush to sort all this out within days now?
This is work that's been going on for over 2 years. We attempted global settlement with the previous government before the parliamentary elections, and it would have been around about 2 years ago as now. That resulted in what was described as a cost share refresh at the time. So that brought some early certainty around the bus interchange, the Port Hills red zone land, the Brooklands red zone land, and a number of other matters. After the election, when we had a new government, that then was, rather than been settled the way that had been agreed with the previous government, was then folded into the negotiations that have got us to the point that we're at now. So this really is a process that started at least a couple of years ago with the previous government. Brendan and his team have been working with the current government for, well, over a year, maybe 18 months. And we've been briefed regularly as council, and we've provided guidance at various gateways around our level of comfort with things that are proposed and directions that we wanted to take. Our hope had been that we may have been able to align this decision making with the annual plan at the end of June. It took longer than that, and again we took the view that we wanted to allow the time to get to a negotiated position that was capable of being agreed by both sides. We hadn't reached that point by the end of June. We believe that we have reached that point now. So whilst there's been a short period of time between the information going into the public arena, and some negotiations have been continuing even after the information went into the public arena, that resulted in an update today and will result in a further update on Thursday. We believe that we're now at a point, after a protracted negotiation, that we've arrived at a negotiated position which is capable of being agreed, and we're keen to seize that opportunity while it exists. It'll be notable that Te Pai, the convention centre, doesn't form part of this global settlement. One of the reasons for that, in fact the main reason for that, is that the financial information that we need to make a sensible decision on Te Pai hasn't been made available to us. I believe it's good for the city that we're getting a global settlement that doesn't include the convention centre. We reserve the right to have that conversation later, and I'm sure government will want us to be involved in that conversation later. But of course, as I've always said, we will not be agreeing to anything that's not good for the city, and Te Pai would certainly be a part of that thinking. So given the opportunity to agree to a global settlement of just about everything else, I believe it's right that we take that opportunity while it exists, rather than delaying further, which may result in a position which is less preferable than the one that's in front of us at the moment.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm glad you've confirmed that you're going to produce a financial summary on Thursday before the meeting. I've said my bit about that earlier in the day. But what I wanted to comment on is what Rod Cameron said before. And I hadn't realised today that Rod was going to speak. So
Neither
I think
did
what Rod said at the meeting is really important, and I think I suspect he might be understating the case in terms of the number of dollars that we're talking about for all the engineering work, all the water work. So I just ask you to take cognizance of what Rod has said.
Absolutely. So thank you very much indeed for the comments that you made as part of your deputation today, and that has resulted in a call for clear financial information to be presented at the beginning of the meeting on Thursday. So, you know, I think the comments I've made about yours and Garry's submissions in particular, deputations in particular, show that we've taken everything that we've heard today very, very seriously, and in a number of cases that has resulted in request for advice, request for information, all of which we'll want to be put in front of us in an acceptable way before we debate and decide on Thursday. I'm also pleased that Rod took the opportunity to speak while he was in the room today. I noticed that he was there, and I wondered whether his intention was to speak, and I'm pleased that he did, because the matter that he's raised is one that's a very important consideration, and is one that's been an important consideration to us as we have gone through the negotiation process. And what we're really talking about here around the horizontal infrastructure is a difference in what people thought they were signing up to and deciding at the time that the original cost share agreement was decided and agreed to, and the way that that played out with changes to standards and changes to the understanding and expectation of what was actually to be delivered in terms of the horizontal infrastructure clauses in the cost share agreement. That resulted in a report by Eleanor Trout, who was described as I think the cost share described her as the independent assessor, and it was that report really that saw this matter land where it landed. Government have remained wedded to the position that was put out as a conclusion of that report. And whilst we would have loved to have negotiated this as a part of this global settlement, it's been very clear from the government side, and Brendan might want to comment on this as well, that there is no expectation of any movement. They take the position that the interpretation of the cost share agreements at the time and the independent assessors report led to. We're not seeing any desire, willingness, sign of movement on the government side. So I guess that then comes back to the point I made earlier of agreeing to an acceptable settlement now rather than waiting for a perfect settlement that may in fact never materialise, particularly when on this particular issue governments have not indicated any willingness to reopen the particular discussion. We would absolutely love to, but if it's not a possibility, then for us to spend time trying to get to a better position we may never get to, I would rather take the opportunity that we've got now than risk not being able to agree to something so good by taking more time. Brendan, I don't know whether you've got any comments on that?
Enough. Can I just, I think one of the things we need to say is that the role of a group like this is to remind the Labour members of Parliament in the city that we actually can vote for them or not vote for them. And that is something to remind them that actually they are accountable to the people of the city. Now, Rod was, and thanks for that answer, because I actually think we are part of putting the pressure to assist the council on getting a better decision and getting more money out of central government. They've got a hell of a lot more money than we have. And so, Rod, maybe you could explain what you, to the people here, what you said today about that independent report.
Here.
Oh. Please.
Okay. That report was reverse engineering. It was saying you've got 1.8 of government money to spend, make the scope of work fit. And the engineers within SCIRT, of which there were Transport Agency and City Council and independent consultants, worked their backsides off to create new standards that gave that result. Now, personally though, I come back to my earlier statement. I don't think that particular bit of history matters. We're in a situation where whatever's happened in the past, we've got an untenable situation now, and that's what we should address on, not what happened before. He said, she said, he wrote, she wrote. That's my principle. I used the report today as an illustration because I heard Brendan being reported, never mind whether the report was accurate or not, that was an immovable thing. Personally, I could drive a truck through that report, but that doesn't matter. That's not the basis by which we should say we've got problems. Does that answer it?
Yep. And you also made a comment today that in fact, when the original agreement was settled, you were the guys that were actually doing the work, and you weren't consulted on it. Is that
Correct.
right?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's correct. Do you want to say something on that?
No.
Nice. Okay. Axel. Sorry, I'm going to get back to Axel. He says.
Yes.
Another engineer.
Another engineer. I remember this quite vividly. What happened? It was back in December 2015. It was the Minister of Earthquake Recovery announcing on TV that the asset managers had found $479 million of savings for SCIRT, which I thought, oh, that's a big number. And then
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Then the very next evening, I bump into the chap who was the chief asset engineer for SCIRT. And I thought, let's have a chat with him, see what he has to say about this. And it was a little bit difficult to talk to him because he was foaming at the mouth. He had learned that there was $479 million worth of savings through the government press release. He was not happy. That was all news to him. So just a little reflection on, I don't think that actually was ever reported like that in the media back then. This did not come from SCIRT, this came from somebody else. And so it came as a big surprise. So yeah, 479 million. Woohoo!
This is where my English sarcasm comes into play. We remember that time very fondly. But no, I mean, we were deeply disappointed in the outcome of the interpretation of the cost share agreement and what that actually meant, and then the fact that that was borne out by the independent assessor's report. We take the view that it's where we've landed. That's the history. That's what we've got to work with. There has certainly been a number of attempts to include where we landed with that in this global settlement that we've got in front of us. We've got what we've got in front of us, and that's what we're making a decision on. Yes, we could defer making a decision on what's in front of us on Thursday in the hope of getting a better outcome, but every sign from the other side, and certainly taking Garry's point around political pressure, but everything we've heard from the other side is that their view is that there isn't room to negotiate on this particular point, which is unfortunate.
I'd just like to, by way of a comment, express a different view that came through quite strongly today from many deputations, and I'd like to do that by way of a bit of an analogy. After the February quake, my house broke into, or I ended up being red zoned. I was living with my 2 teenage kids, different sexes, in one garage for over 9 months. When the red zone deal came through, I lost over 60 grand in that deal. But my family came first. Our well-being was really impacted. We needed to move on. We took a deal that wasn't ideal, but it gave us a pathway forward that was very clear. I think that's what we see happening here at the moment. In both the central city and in the Avanatakaroa corridor, we've found a real stalling of the regeneration. We're losing good businesses, we're losing good people, we're losing good opportunities to other regions because this regeneration is stalled. If we stall this for another year while we argue out the fine points, possibly getting maybe 10% better if we're very lucky, we'll end up with no city left. We've got to move on. This gives us a clear way to move on, and that's why many of the deputations today said that despite all that you've said is probably true, it's not fair, it's not good, but it's at least it's a basis to move forward, and we desperately need to do that as a city. Cheers.
Right, since holding the mic before, most of my questions have been answered. However, I would like to get back to politics, and we have this issue. It's going to be perhaps an issue with the next election over the stadium. So we seem to have two things: how we're going to do both the stadium and all this engineering that we now know needs to be done. I suspect that you're just going to make a big issue over election. I've been through this. I've been involved for 40 years, and I've been the son of a mayor. It's great to have people doing the work for me, but I suspect that you're just going to make this election issue, and you're not really listening to us, that we want the engineering done ahead of the stadium, and you're just going to brainwash us. Yep.
It's not my intention to bring anybody. And any mayoral candidate, any council candidate should be able to articulate an answer to how we deal with what quite possibly is a tension between the two, certainly is a matter of priorities, and ultimately becomes a matter of affordability. So I come back to the comments I made earlier about the council's financial strategy, the council's infrastructure strategy, and the fact that we've already got within our existing long-term plan, annual plan, $253 million on budget to contribute to the stadium, and how we already have a financial strategy that brings the rate of rate increases down to the level of inflation experienced by council over the 10 years of the LTP, and I'd expect that to remain the case. I'd like to speed that up if we possibly can. And at the same time, we've got a 30-year infrastructure strategy, and we will have asset management plans that mean that we'll know what is required to bring the infrastructure up to standard over an acceptable period. Finding the balance is something we've always got to be good at in local government. I mean, there will be people in this room that don't believe we should build a stadium at all. There'll be other people in this room who absolutely believe we must have a stadium.
What, tomorrow?
Well, it's not going to be tomorrow, but we've committed to it, and we've committed to it over a period of time.
For big business,
it will be. You're absolutely.
For us.
I mean, the one thing you're absolutely right on is that this will be an election issue.
Good.
And looking at people that have put their names forward for election, I don't doubt there will be different positions put forward by different candidates.
Let's have a proper discussion, though, not just the media type discussion, which doesn't exactly help get good
Why don't
councillors in.
we'll do one on the stadium. That'd be great. I know where I'm going to stand.
You've essentially addressed my point. I have no interest in a stadium personally, but I think there probably are a lot of people in Christchurch for whom having the All Blacks play a test is the most important thing in the world, and building a stadium is first and foremost in their minds. I'm not one of those people. I would like to see a Christchurch that is a point of difference. We don't have to have what every other city has. Let's do our own thing, something very different. I'm very passionate about seeing the red zone turn into an incredible wilderness, tourist, recreation, mental health area, that leads the world in what a city can be with nature in the middle of it, embracing it completely. I'm much more interested and getting the people right. Immediately after the earthquakes, I felt the most important thing is to get the people right, not the economy, not even the infrastructure, but the people first, and everything else will follow from that. Now the infrastructure supports the people, and businesses support the people, but people first.
Yep. Not Fletcher's.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the ones who are going to make money out of the stadium.
Tom, did you have? Yep, right. I thought you were either scratching the nose or the hand up.
Garry, never put my hand up for you, Garry. You should know that.
A few people know who I am, but there's a couple of things I would like to say. Is that I think that Christchurch is in a very delicate position at the moment, and people do matter, and I really care, and I've cared for a long, long time about our city. I do not live in this city anymore, unfortunately, but I do bring a lot of international visitors to New Zealand, and anybody from Auckland, including my family, I bring them back year on year to have a look at our city. And now they're saying, wow, it's changed, it's different. And we have that opportunity. Now, I know some people are against the park, but if you look back in history, I was lucky enough to watch Peter Snell run a very, very good mile. And I know what that did for the tourism industry in Christchurch, because my father ran a pub at that stage. And he did very, very well. And so, sometimes, and I've seen some good music there, I've seen some lousy, shitty rugby games, which we wouldn't want to talk about, and the cricket would make me cry. But never mind, there's another story. The thing is about the city, I think, if we accept what we've got ahead of us now, one of the things we should be doing, and this is all of New Zealand, it's not Christchurch only, there's been an under-investment in infrastructure for years and years and years. And every province and every city in New Zealand can't afford it anymore. So there has to be some form of split GST that goes back to local government to work. And if we start doing that and start pushing for that, maybe we'll get more things that we really, really need. The other one is, never ever again do I want to see a successive set of governments pillory EQC's cash to use for other things. It should be dedicated only to EQC's work, and maybe EQC could have delivered better on that basis. Sorry guys, I'm so sad sometimes, but at the same time today made me feel bloody good because so many people said, just get on with it and start looking to the future and maybe addressing it in a different way.
Thank you, Tom.
Andrew, I'd just like to kind of follow up on a question you got earlier there, and the question was kind of what's the rush? I think the question was more along the lines of public consultation. That's the angle that I'd be looking at it from. So I know the Local Government Act has been raised today. A question, because this has been out for consultation for less than a week or whatever, how many submissions has there been in total that's been received by council over this past week?
So we had a number of deputations this morning. So
around about 20.
I'm not sure what the exact number was. We heard a number of people between 9:30 this morning and about 12:15.
Yeah, that's what Glenn Livingston had on his Facebook page. 20.
Yeah, so quite possibly 20. And I mean, I know there have been discussions going on in a number of groups and around a number of dinner tables and groups of friends and so on in Christchurch this week, and some people have decided that they would come along and make a deputation and others haven't. The impression I get talking to people around town is that there are a number of people who are deeply engaged in this conversation and deeply passionate about it. And there are a large number of other people in Christchurch who are aware of it, but at a high level and wouldn't want to engage as deeply as the people that we heard from this morning. Have we given enough time for everybody that might have wanted to bring a deputation this morning to be able to do so? Have we given enough time for everybody to be aware that this is happening and to read the information that there's in our papers in depth? I don't know the answer to that question. I would hope that with the publicity surrounding this, we had a meeting.
Considering the implications of the decision that you're making,
yep.
When it comes to public consultation, the set of traffic lights or whatever, the intersection improvement at Harewood Breen's Gardeners went out for a certain period of time. There was over 1,000 submissions, so it's like 4 times the number of submissions that the annual plan got this year for the whole city. Do you think that 8 days, considering the scope of this, it's a rhetorical question basically,
well,
is sufficient?
I think given that we've got to where we've got to, given that we had 20 well-engaged people presenting to us today, given that this was signalled well ahead of the paper coming into the public arena and the information being made available, I actually think that given, and again, some may not agree with me, but given the need to make a decision before the election, I don't think it's good practice at all for us to pass this on to a future council. I think it's a piece of work that we started and we should finish so that it sets the next council up in a good position. I made some comments earlier around the original desire to be able to...
Could the argument be made that you're setting the next council up to fail?
I don't think so. We will not, as I said earlier, we will not be agreeing.
Cost share agreement.
We will not be agreeing to something that's not good for Christchurch.
8 days only.
That's open to interpretation.
If you look at the way that the original cost share agreement was agreed, that was all behind closed doors. The final agreement was made by 3 people, not even the full council, who were not even aware of the details of the final agreement that was made. Some have said that making that comparison isn't relevant to the decision that we're making today, but certainly the way that things were done in 2013 and the way that we're doing them now, there's a whole lot more opportunity for public engagement, public awareness, transparency and openness than there was in 2013. If I thought we were agreeing to a deal that was anything like the cost share agreement in 2013 and that was run by anything like that process, I wouldn't be anywhere near to agreeing to it. I think we've run an open and transparent process. I think given the rules around decision making before an election and the need to get something done, and there might be some debate about the need for speed, I think we've done the best that we possibly can in the circumstances. And we had 20 good people engaged with us really well this morning, and I was really pleased to hear from them.
Peter. Me. Oh, thank you. That's you.
Yeah. Hey, this has been a really, really good discussion and getting lots of really, really helpful and things that you guys I know are hopefully listening to, and sort of worked out a bit on Thursday. When I was writing for my deputation on behalf of Eastern Vision today, I nearly cried, really, because I look back on the 8.5 years that we've just been through. I've been shitty in so many ways. We've been treated really badly. I was part on the City Council at the time of the cost-sharing agreement. We, just as you say, we had no real part to play. We were rolled over by Wellington in so many ways. I remember taking on the Minister for Earthquake Recovery at a meeting. He never met with us for 18 months. Never met with us for 18 months. And then when he did meet with us, he just blasted us. So we know all about that stuff. I was shitty. We've had to deal with all sorts of agencies that, who actually leads this city, we were thinking. Where are decisions made? Who tells who what to do around here? And in the midst of all this, we've got people. I come from the East. I would live in Richmond. And I've had 8 years, I know I've been away a little bit, but working with people who've been really through hell. Many of us here have been through hell as a result of the earthquakes and how we've been dealt with. But you're right, we've got to move on. And the people that we're hearing with and we're working with, Evan and I and others, are desperate to move on. We really need to move on. And what this agreement does, it's got flaws in it. There are dead rats in it. We've swallowed a lot in the last 8.5 years. We're probably going to have to swallow some more. But nevertheless, it provides, and this is where the people who were there this morning, who represent, a lot of them came from around where I live in Richmond, but that's indicative of a whole lot of other stuff in the residential red zone and where people are at. Many of them are seriously wanting to give it away. And just, it's interesting, I thought this place would be packed this evening. I actually thought it would be absolutely packed. I thought the council chamber this morning would be packed. I know in the 8 days, you're dead right. It's shocking in many ways, but we thought it would be packed. I hope on Thursday, they're actually debating this on Thursday in public. Last time, public were excluded. They're excluded. They're debating this in public on Thursday, so come along and listen to our councillors as they debate this stuff. But what it does, and this is why I will support this agreement, with all its flaws, with all the other stuff, but it does allow for people to actually begin to grasp something. We've been stuck, we've been stymied. There's so many things that we need to move on with. And this gives us some certainty. It actually gives the city back to the city. Gives the city back to us. Gets the crown out of it. Let's have a proper relationship. We can go on, we say, no, we've got to keep on fighting this, working it out. Who knows? We may get something better. Or we probably won't. And in the meantime, the longer it takes, whether it's a year or 2 years to get to that point, a hell of a lot of people, particularly I'm thinking for us in the East, who are going to be done down again. They've had it. Exhausted with it, over it, moving out, not going to be bothered anymore. When I came back from New Plymouth a year ago, and I went into, and I just saw the extraordinary, exciting, inspirational stuff that people were doing in that community. And that's not just happening in Richmond, it's across all parts of the city. They're just getting on and doing it. But you can't keep doing it if you don't have the kind of resources and the infrastructure, political, whatever it might be, to enable that to go on. And a lot of people say, we've had it. We can't do this anymore. So that's why I think I want the council to support this on Thursday. I want you to listen to what people like Garry and others and Rod have said and actually make sure that these things are addressed in some form or other. And we move on. We move on for the sake of our city and our people. Because that it's in our blood. What people have been through in the East is actually soaked into that ground there. It's part of our life, it's our wairua, and we need to move on, and people need to be engaged in that process of making the decisions into the future. So I want to thank you for actually in the issues around governance and the rest of it, you're talking about sharing this out with the local community. That's not just the City Council, that means us people here, and the others who represent the wider community. I'll shut up now. So I just want to say, thank you for this evening. That's been really helpful. I've learned a lot, but at the same time, I actually think it's time to move.
I've just got a couple of things to say, really. At the time, up until 2015, I was on the dark side. I worked for Sarah. And when the 100-day plan came out, I was given the responsibility for the designations. Now, there was a group of us who defied the minister and defied the chief executive, and I'm very proud to be able to have been part of that team that gave us the CTV memorial site, because we defied what the minister wanted to do. He wanted to sell the land. That's right. But the thing that when Garry asked for submissions in relation to this, the first thing that came to my mind is the government is the bad actor when it comes to negotiation. They want to externalise all their costs, and so they're back to where they were before. Now, I think that with the dollar package, we need to be very, very careful about looking to give to us in the mouth, because we've seen recently where some of the land has been discovered to be contaminated by asbestos. And in those early days, there was a lot of, well, we could call them shonky players. And I would suggest very, very strongly that the council do its due diligence in relation to that $1 package, because I'm sure that just over a metre down you'll find asbestos. Thank you.
Right. There you go. So, 7:06. I'd like to thank everybody for this evening. I stand. I have to say, having spent a number of years in local government, that I do not trust central government at all. And central government politicians shaft local government politicians every day and think nothing of it. Even those who came from local government, when they get into central government, something happens to their heads. And I've also been involved in the negotiations with, in particular, Treasury, and they are the toughest bastards this side of the black stuff. And so I think that the way we can assist the negotiating team is to actually stand alongside them and say, keep going. And I think we also need to thank them for, I've stood in this guy's place and it's hard work. And there will always be people that will disagree with you. And the man in the back row, his father paid the ultimate price of losing his mayoralty when the public of Christchurch turned on him. And so we've had a history of that.
No, they go through the park. It was actually Skellerup. It's its own crowd, actually. It's how it's the rot is in your own gut.
Just remember the old story of Winston Churchill when he was training a young Member of Parliament, and the young Member of Parliament said, "Oh, so that's the enemy over there." And Winston Churchill said, "Oh no, that's the opposition. The enemy are in behind you." That's, any of us that have been in political parties, we know exactly what that means. So, thank you for coming along tonight. And I think you'll see there's a range of views here, which is the same as town. And it's really important that we have a clearinghouse to do this sort of thing. So, thank you for being here, and I'd like you to... I take it the Minister of Earthquake Recovery read my notes this week because I had a phone call from her office saying that she wished to speak next week. Do you remember giving us this date, said her person, and quite frankly I didn't. But so we may have the Minister or we may not. So I will, I'm not quite sure where we're going to be on that one yet. But we'll see you next week.